Hi, welcome to OpenLC Solutions. Today we're continuing our journey through the 2014 Ordinary Level Paper 1. We're moving on to question 6 now, which is all about sequences and series. We're told the general term of an arithmetic sequence is given by this Tn equals 15 minus 2n, and we're asked to write down the first three terms of the sequence. In other words, what happens when n is 1, what happens when n is 2, and what happens when n is 3. So we say, what is T1? It's 15 minus 2 times 1 using the formula that they've given us and just replacing the n with a 1. So you get 15 minus 2, which is 13. Work out T2 is going to be 15 minus 2 times 2, which is 15 minus 4, which turns out to be 11. And finally, T3, same process as before, 15 minus 2 times 3, replacing the n with a 3. Then we have a 15 minus a 6, which turns out to be a 9. We're then asked to find the first negative term of the sequence. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. You could just keep going with the sequence that you're working on. So you're starting with 13, then 11, then 9, and work your way forward until you get the first negative term. It won't always work out so easily though, because sometimes it could be like the 100th term in the sequence, in which case you have to just go through like 100 different terms to try and find your way to the first negative term. So I think the best way to do this is to treat this negative term thing as a condition. In other words, what we're trying to say is, when is this term, so it's some term down the list, we don't know what it is, when is that negative? Well, what's the qualifying factor for negative? It has to be less than 0. That is what we're looking for. When is this term less than 0? That's what they're really asking about when they say negative. So how do we work this out? Well, Tn is given by 15 minus 2n. That has to be less than 0. So you get 15 is less than 2n. And so 15 over 2 is less than n, or n is bigger than 15 over 2. And so that's 7.5. If n has to be bigger than that, and we know based on the very beginning of the question we're told n is a natural number, so it has to be the next natural number in the list. In other words, n is 8. It's the next natural number in this list, so next one up from 7.5 is going to be 8. But that's not quite what we're asked for. We're asked, what is the first negative term? What we have is, which term is it? So to finish this one off, we have to say, what is T8? Well, it's 15 minus 2 times 8, just putting it into our formula as before. So 15 minus 16, which turns out to be a minus 1. We move on to part B then, which asks us to find Sn, which is the sum of the first n terms of the... What they say is that the series, I think they've got that wrong, to be honest. I think this should be a sequence, because when you use the word series, it refers to the sum. So what we should be saying is, the sum of the sequence is the series. Now, that's a little bit pedantic, and yeah, it's pretty obvious what they mean, I think. And there's only a handful of ways you can deal with this anyway, so we have to go with this formula that we're given in the formula tables book. So the sum up to n is n over 2 times 2a plus n minus 1 times d. To be able to deal with this, we have to know what a and d are. We don't get to know what n is because the point of this is this should work for any number of terms that we want to look at, but a and d are always going to be the same. A is the first term in the sequence, T1, which we worked out earlier was 13. And D is the common difference. Well, what's actually happening every time? We're subtracting 2. So the common difference is minus 2. And that minus is important, so make sure that you remember to put that in. So now we substitute everything in. So we get n over 2. Again, we don't get to do anything with that n really, at least not yet. So it becomes 2 times 13, because A is 13. Plus n minus 1 times minus 2, and all we have to do here is algebra our way to the n, so we get 26 there, minus 2n and a plus 2 So it's n over 2. That's going to be 28 minus 2n. And arguably that's fine as an answer, but really we should clean it up a little bit more. We can multiply the n over 2 into this, and so we end up with this is going to be a 14 n, because the 28 is going to divide by 2, which gives you 14, and then the n is going to be attached to it as well. And then we've got a minus 2n gets multiplied by the n over 2 as well, which is going to turn out to be minus n squared, again because the 2 that's attached to the n here gets divided out by the division of 2 on the outside of this bracket, and the n multiply together to get an n squared. So this is the sum of the first n terms of the sequence. This is Sn. The very last part of this question says to find the value of n for which the sum of the first n terms of the series is 0. Again, I think this should be sequence rather than series. That's because the series means what happens when you add them up. So it's the sum of the terms of the sequence is the series. But again, that's just me being pedantic. So let's just continue with this. We already know that the sum of the first n terms of the sequence is given by this. We worked it out in the very last question. So the question is asking, find the value for which the sum of the first n terms is 0. In other words, what happens when this equals 0? What is the value of n that makes this true? And so this is going to be a factorization type question. So between these two, the 14n and the n squared, n is common. So take that out as a common factor and you end up with 14 minus n equals 0. And so we have a product of two things equals 0. We end up with two scenarios. Case 1, where the first item in the product is 0, so we say n equals 0. And case 2, the other item in the product is 0, in which case 14 minus n equals 0. The first one's already as far gone as we can get it, but we can mess around with this case 2 as well, end up with 14 equals n, or n equals 14. They mean the same thing. Now, it's only asking for one value. It's not values, it's value. So we need to eliminate one of these. To be able to eliminate one of these, you need to either just remember the way sequences work, or you can go back to the beginning of the question where they tell you that n is a natural number, which means that it has to be a positive whole number. So one of these is not a positive whole number, and it is the 0. It's not positive, it's 0, so this is invalid. And so the correct answer can only be n is 14. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll talk to you again in the next episode.